Let me start with a number. Not an opinion, a number. 6 weeks. For 6 consecutive weeks, the most powerful military on the face of this planet, with the world's largest air force, the most advanced bunker buster bombs in human history, 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, and the full intelligence sharing apparatus of both the CIA and Mossad, conducted sustained bombing operations against the nuclear facilities of a nation that, according to the President of the United States himself, has no air force, no navy, and no leadership. 6 weeks. And on June 13th, 2026, CNN published an exclusive report citing 5 separate sources with direct access to American intelligence assessments. And what those 5 sources revealed is one of the most extraordinary strategic outcomes of any military campaign in the modern era. Iran still has its uranium, all of it, roughly half a ton, somewhere between 440 and 500 kilograms of near weapons-grade, highly enriched uranium, enriched to 60%, which is a very short technical step away from the 90% threshold you need to build a nuclear device. And not only does America not have it, America cannot get to it. Because in the weeks since Trump began publicly telegraphing that the US might seize the material by force, Iran collapsed its own tunnels. It planted explosive mines at the entrances. It booby-trapped its own uranium cache so thoroughly that, according to the nuclear removal experts cited in that same CNN report, even Iran itself would now need heavy excavation equipment and demining teams just to access its own stockpile. Think about what that means. 6 weeks of bombing. And the central strategic objective, neutralizing Iran's nuclear capability, has not been achieved. It has been made harder. Today, I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes showing you exactly how Iran pulled this off, why almost nobody in mainstream media is framing it this way, and what it tells us about who is actually winning the most important strategic contest of our time. Not on a battlefield, but inside a mountain, 100 meters underground, behind a wall of collapsed rock and explosive mines. Are you ready? Let's go. Before I walk you through the evidence, I need to give you a framework, because without a framework, you can't evaluate the evidence properly. You'll just react emotionally to each individual data point without seeing the architecture underneath them. I want to introduce you to what I'm calling the buried asset doctrine. This is not a term you'll find in mainstream news coverage. It's a term I'm using to describe a specific strategic logic that Iran has been executing with remarkable discipline over the past 6 weeks. A logic that has 3 distinct layers. Layer 1 is physical denial. You make the asset physically inaccessible. Not destroyed, inaccessible. There is a crucial difference between those 2 things that I'm going to come back to, because that difference is the entire game. Layer 2 is negotiating leverage preservation. You keep the asset in a state of ambiguity. America doesn't know exactly how much uranium there is, exactly where all of it is, or exactly what condition it's in. That ambiguity is not a failure of Iranian record keeping. That ambiguity is a weapon. Layer 3 is what I call the catastrophic retrieval dilemma. You ensure that any attempt to forcibly access the asset creates a scenario so dangerous, so politically explosive, and so technically complex that even the country with overwhelming military superiority looks at it and says, not today. Now, when you apply this framework to everything that has happened over the last 6 weeks, a very different picture emerges from the one being painted for you on the nightly news. The picture is not America bombed Iran's nuclear program and succeeded. The picture is not even America bombed Iran's nuclear program and failed. The actual picture is far more unsettling than either of those. The picture is this: Iran anticipated the bombing, prepared for it, and used the bombing itself as the trigger to execute the final phase of a plan it had been designing for years. The bombing didn't set Iran back. The bombing set the trap. Let me start with the physical facts, because theory without data is just storytelling. According to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, analysis of satellite imagery from before the February 2026 strikes shows that Iran had already begun transferring its highly enriched uranium stockpile to the Isfahan underground complex, possibly moving all of it there, before the US and Israeli air campaign even began. This was not a reaction to the strikes. This was a preparation for them. Iran moved its most critical strategic asset into its deepest, most fortified location before the first bomb fell. Now let's talk about Isfahan specifically, because this facility is the center of the entire nuclear story, and almost no one in mainstream media is describing it accurately. Isfahan is not just a building. It is a tunnel complex buried deep beneath a mountain in central Iran, approximately 300 miles inland from any coast, which matters enormously for any ground operation. The tunnels go down approximately 100 meters. American bunker buster bombs, including the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the most powerful conventional bunker buster in existence, are designed to penetrate roughly 60 meters of reinforced concrete. 100 meters of mountain rock is a fundamentally different engineering problem. The BBC spoke to former US defense officials who confirmed what nuclear experts had been saying for months. Conventional airstrikes alone cannot destroy deeply buried underground storage. They can collapse the entrances. They can damage the surrounding infrastructure. But the material inside, the uranium itself, stored in large pressurized metal containers in gaseous form, can survive. And here's the thing that Trump himself inadvertently confirmed on Fox News when he told Sean Hannity, and I'm quoting directly, "That's so deeply buried, it's going to be very hard for anybody. It's down there deep. So it's pretty safe." The President of the United States, describing the uranium cache of the country he had been bombing for 6 weeks, called it pretty safe. Let that land for a moment, because that is an extraordinary admission. He didn't say we destroyed it, he said it's safe from us. Now, on top of the pre-existing depth challenge, CNN's June 13th report reveals that Iran has, in the weeks since the bombing campaign began, dramatically escalated its fortification of these sites. Tunnels have been deliberately collapsed. Explosive mines have been planted at every entrance. Scott Roker, who headed the National Nuclear Security Administration's Office of Nuclear Material Removal from 2017 to 2021, told CNN directly, "Even if negotiators require that Iran bring the entire stockpile to a central location for verification, he would worry that Iran would claim that some portion of the HEU was irretrievable, and America wouldn't have full confidence that Iran couldn't retain access to it at some point in the future." Read that again carefully. One of America's own former nuclear removal experts is saying, even in the best case diplomatic scenario, America can't be certain it got everything. The booby trapping doesn't just make military seizure impossible. It creates permanent deniability inside any diplomatic agreement. That is not an accident. That is architecture. Now I want to show you the central irony at the heart of this entire 6-week campaign, because I think this is one of the most important analytical failures that mainstream coverage is committing right now. The stated objective of the bombing campaign from the very first day was to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons capability. That was the justification. That was the red line. And I want to be completely fair to the American position here. I always want to give the strongest version of the opposing argument before I challenge it. The Steelman case is this. Iran's enrichment facilities at Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan were significantly damaged in the June 2025 strikes. Iran's ability to produce new enriched uranium has been severely degraded. The IAEA has confirmed that Fordow is inoperable. Natanz has been hit repeatedly. The argument is, yes, the existing stockpile is buried and inaccessible, but Iran can't make more. So the program is effectively frozen, and that is a strategic win. That is a genuinely serious argument, and I won't pretend otherwise. But here is what that argument cannot account for. First, the Arms Control Association's analysis from March 2026 notes explicitly, it is not clear whether the damage to Fordow is permanent or whether Iran could restore it. Iran has a documented history of building redundant facilities and dispersed centrifuge programs that intelligence agencies discovered only after the fact. We know what we can see from satellite imagery. We do not know what we cannot see. Second, and more fundamentally, the bombing campaign designed to prevent Iran from going nuclear has now given Iran the most powerful argument in modern international relations for why it must go nuclear. Think about what Iran has watched happen to countries that gave up their deterrence. Libya gave up its nuclear program in 2003. NATO-backed forces killed Gaddafi in 2011. Iraq had no nuclear weapons. America invaded and destroyed the government. Iran was attacked by the United States and Israel, while nuclear negotiations were still actively ongoing, in February 2026. What rational conclusion does any government draw from that pattern? There is only one conclusion available. The only thing that protects you from American military intervention is a nuclear weapon. And former American diplomat Alan Ayre said this on June 3rd with striking directness. Iran would likely attempt to obtain a nuclear weapon, which wasn't the case before the war. Before the war, Iran was hedging. After the war, they will weaponize. The bombing campaign to prevent nuclear weapons has accelerated the path to nuclear weapons. This is the central irony. And the booby-trapping of the uranium cache is not a desperate last-ditch move by a defeated nation. It is the physical manifestation of a strategic doctrine that says, you cannot take this from us, you cannot destroy it without our cooperation, and now you have given us every reason in the world never to cooperate. Now let me give you the specific numbers that explain why 6 weeks of the most sophisticated bombing campaign in modern history produced the strategic outcome it produced. America's primary challenge in this campaign was what nuclear experts call the hardened and deeply buried target problem. The GBU-57, America's heaviest conventional bomb, weighs approximately 13,600 kilograms and can penetrate up to 60 meters of reinforced concrete, the most powerful non-nuclear penetrating munition in existence. Isfahan's uranium storage tunnels are estimated to be buried under 100 meters of mountain rock, not reinforced concrete. Mountain rock and engineered concrete behave differently under explosive stress. The physics do not favor a clean result. The IAEA's Rafael Grossi confirmed in late May that his inspectors had not been able to visit the sites since being evacuated from Iran after the June 2025 strikes, meaning the international community is working from satellite imagery and indirect intelligence assessments, not ground-level verification. The exact quantity, location, and condition of Iran's uranium stockpile is genuinely uncertain, even to the people who ordered 6 weeks of bombing to address it. And now consider the negotiating table consequence of this uncertainty. Trump has reportedly made removing the uranium from Iran a core demand of any ceasefire deal. The senior administration official who briefed reporters on Friday, June 13th, said the two sides are inching closer to a deal that would require Iran to turn its enriched uranium over to the U.S. to be destroyed on site and then taken out of the country. The CNN report also notes that top negotiators Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff visited Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, home of the specialized mobile uranium facility that would be needed for such an operation, suggesting the administration is actively planning for the logistics. But here is what the current state of the buried, booby-trapped, mine-surrounded uranium cache actually means for that negotiation. Iran now holds a card that it cannot be disarmed of by military force. If they sign a deal, America has to trust Iran to excavate its own uranium, using its own equipment, from under its own mountain, past its own mines, and hand it over. There is no scenario in which America can independently verify full compliance without Iranian cooperation. Scott Roker said it plainly. Iran could claim some portion was irretrievable, and America would have no way to prove otherwise. This is not Iran losing a negotiation. This is Iran shaping the negotiation from a position of physical reality that 6 weeks of bombing could not alter. I want to go one level deeper now, because I think there is a dimension to this that almost nobody is discussing. And it is the dimension that explains not just what Iran did, but why they did it in precisely this way, at precisely this time. There is a principle in deterrence theory called raising the cost of resolution. The idea is straightforward. When you are in a weaker position militarily, you cannot win by matching your adversary's strength. But you can win by making every path to resolution so expensive, so risky, and so politically complicated that your adversary eventually concludes that the cost of continuing is higher than the cost of accepting an outcome that leaves your core interests intact. The booby-trapped uranium is a perfect physical embodiment of this principle. By making the uranium inaccessible, not just to American forces, but even to themselves, Iran has done something quite remarkable. They have removed the option of a clean, unilateral military resolution from the table entirely. America cannot bomb its way to the uranium. America cannot send special forces to retrieve it without a ground operation of historic complexity 300 miles inland. And America cannot negotiate a deal that gives it certainty, because Iran's own mines ensure that certainty is physically impossible to provide. What Iran has done is transform its nuclear stockpile from a vulnerability into a permanent negotiating asset, buried under a mountain, protected by explosives, located in a city of millions, a city that any ground operation would have to pass through. The uranium is not Iran's weakness anymore. The uranium, in its current state, is Iran's greatest strategic strength. Now, I want to be completely fair, as I always try to be. Here is the strongest possible counter-argument to everything I've just said. Professor, you are dramatically overstating Iran's position. Yes, the uranium is buried, but Iran's ability to do anything with it has been destroyed. The centrifuges are gone. The enrichment infrastructure is gone. The scientists are gone. Israel has been systematically targeting nuclear expertise since the beginning. Iran has uranium it cannot access and no machinery left to process it even if it could. A buried half-ton of unusable material is not a weapon. It is a rock. And America's true objective was never to physically possess that uranium. It was to end Iran's ability to enrich new uranium, which has been achieved. The buried stockpile is a trophy in a locked room. Who cares? That is a strong argument. It has internal logic. It explains why some American officials are describing the campaign as a strategic success. But here is what that argument cannot explain. The IAEA itself and multiple arms control organizations have explicitly stated that Iran's enrichment capacity, while severely degraded, has not been permanently destroyed. The Arms Control Association noted that it is unclear whether damage to key facilities is permanent. Iran built one secret enrichment facility before, at Fordo, without American intelligence knowing. The possibility of a covert dispersed program cannot be ruled out by bombing what you can see. Furthermore, the half-ton of near-weapons-grade uranium, even if currently inaccessible, does not decay. It does not expire. It sits under that mountain, and when a ceasefire eventually holds and international inspectors eventually return, the question of that uranium's status, location, and completeness becomes the central issue of Iranian compliance for the next decade. America has created not a resolved problem, but a permanently complicated one. Sealed under rubble, ringed with mines, generating uncertainty indefinitely. Let me bring this all together and give you 3 specific things to watch in the next 72 hours. First, watch the language around uranium verification in any deal announcement. Trump has said publicly that Iran must hand over its uranium. Iran's foreign ministry has offered conflicting accounts of what any draft deal actually says. The critical test is this: does any signed agreement include independent verification that the complete stockpile has been accounted for? Or does it include language that allows Iran to declare some portion inaccessible or irretrievable due to structural damage? If you see the second kind of language, you are looking at an agreement that leaves Iran's nuclear ambiguity intact, which, from Iran's perspective, is the entire point. Second, watch whether Trump stops mentioning uranium seizure entirely and starts calling a deal a victory anyway. We have already seen 39 announcements of breakthroughs that did not materialize. The 40th announcement is coming. The question is whether it resolves the uranium question or papers over it. If he stops talking about the uranium and starts talking about Iran's commitment never to seek nuclear weapons, a verbal promise, then you are watching the gap between the stated objective and the achievable outcome be quietly papered over. Governments do this. They call it diplomacy. Watch for it. Third, watch the IAEA. The moment any ceasefire agreement includes provisions for IAEA inspectors to return to Iran, watch what Rafael Grossi says. He has been careful, precise, and honest throughout this conflict. When his teams eventually go back to Isfahan and file their first report, the numbers they report, the inventory they can and cannot account for, will tell you more about who actually won this 6-week campaign than any press conference from either side. Here is your homework, and I am serious about this. I want you to actually do it. Read the full CNN exclusive from June 13th, written by Davis Winke. Find the original, not a summary. Read every word, including the technical detail from Scott Roker about the difference between destroying uranium and making it irretrievable. Then, read the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists analysis from March 2026 on how Iran transferred its uranium to Isfahan before the strikes even began. Put those 2 documents side by side and ask yourself one question. When exactly did Iran plan this? Because the answer to that question tells you everything about whether America's 6-week campaign was a military operation against a reactive adversary or a geopolitical chess move against a player who had already set up the board before the first bomb fell. And if you find anything that contradicts what I've argued today, come argue with me in the comments. I genuinely want that. The only way any of us gets to a clearer picture is through better evidence and honest disagreement. I am not asking you to agree with me. I am asking you to look at the same data and ask a different question than the one the nightly news is asking. The nightly news is asking, did America win the bombing campaign? The question you should be sitting with is this: what is a victory worth if the one thing you fought for is still under a mountain, behind a wall of mines, and nobody, not the inspectors, not the diplomats, not even the Iranians themselves, can tell you exactly how much of it is there? I'll see you in the next one.